The relationship with Paul began simply with an email to him. You know, I heard that interview. I was moving from Princeton to California to Los Angeles, literally the next day or something. And I just felt compelled to reach out to him, which I had never had done at the past. I wasn't really that type of writer. And I didn't necessarily think he'd respond, but I sort of wrote as honest and emotional an email as I could without sounding strange. You know, I didn't want to scare him off. And I said, I heard your interview and I was moved by it. And I said in the first interview, you know, I think maybe there's something of a play in your story, but I don't know. I don't know exactly what it would be. And I sent off the email and heard back. I think I was halfway or a little more than halfway across the country, just got an email back from him. I've since learned that that's very much his style. He's very open. I mean, he's very open to strangers getting in touch with him about his work. And I think, you know, that's part of what's special about him. Maybe that's common to all journalists, but I think he was excited that somebody was responding so passionately to what he'd written and to what he's been through. We then spent maybe 2 years just being pen pals, really, essentially. We did not speak on the phone, which I found kind of interesting. I mean, I think I would bring it up, or I'd say maybe we should Skype or something, and he would just kind of not respond to that. You know, we would just sort of email back and forth. And I think it was a relief for both of us, maybe, because I was probably intimidated. And I've since learned that I think to some degree he preferred to write about a lot of these experiences rather than to have a conversation about it. Probably owing very much to his PTSD. You know, I think in many ways it's easier to write about some of these traumatic experiences he's witnessed. Then after about 2 years, the play itself came into focus for me. I sort of understood how I was going to try to write it, and applied for a few grants to go visit him. I felt like, okay, now's the time. I knew that it was going to be, the structure would be very much a character like me getting to know him. And so it felt important that we meet each other, you know, that the first act was going to be Dan and Paul. I mean, his memoir is called Where War Lives, and some of the first emails we sent each other, I said, let's just write to each other about where we are. You know, I went from Princeton to LA, and then I was spending some time in deepest, coldest, darkest Wisconsin teaching, and he was off in Jakarta, and I just found that very interesting that we were in such different places. Again, that idea of the uncanny, you know, that I was, you know, trapped in this very cerebral, lonely semester in Wisconsin, and he was off, you know, interviewing Al-Qaeda members in Indonesia, you know. So I felt that the second act, really, we should come together in some fashion. So I applied for a few grants to help with that trip, you know, and received 2 that helped me plan a trip, and he was open to it for sure, although I think as I tried to capture in the play, you know, a little wary also of letting somebody into his life to that degree. It just so happened that he lost his job at the LA Times. At the LA Times, he had been the Southeast bureau chief for the LA Times, based in Jakarta, and he was very vocal about what was happening at the LA Times in terms of downsizing, and so the plan had been to go to Jakarta and meet him, but he set up a new job with the Toronto Star, which is the paper he'd been working for when he won the Pulitzer in '94. And he had sold them this idea that he would cover the Arctic and Aboriginal beat, is what he called it, and they called it, for the Toronto Star. So it just sort of worked out all of a sudden that he would be in the Northwest Territories, and which for me was another moment of huge serendipity, because I've spent most of my writing life fairly obsessed with the Arctic and Arctic stories and Arctic history. So the idea, and also just again the metaphorical, symbolic implications of the Arctic felt so right for this story. So when it just worked out, then within a couple days, you know, this change happened, and it just seemed so appropriate. And so then we got to know each other well, fairly well in person. You know, when I went up to visit him, in some ways very well, because we were in very intimate, close contact for about a week. And since then, we've remained in, we email a lot. This play, we're adapting it into an opera. There's a collection of poetry that I've adapted from the play and from just other writings of his. We're even discussing the possibility of a TV drama. So we've been working on that together. So we're probably in closer contact than we've ever been.